If you're watching this, you already know humanity's reputation among the stars isn't exactly flattering. We're stubborn, unpredictable, and, if you ask some species, just a little insane. But today's story? Oh, this is the one they show in alien military academies under the heading, "Never underestimate the hairless primates." And before we get started, if you love these kinds of stories, smash that like button, drop your wildest theory in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time humanity makes the galaxy sweat. Now let's get into it. The northern sky danced in shades of green and violet, a hypnotic shimmer that pulled Jack Rourke's eyes upward. He'd seen the aurora borealis before, but never this bright, never this violent. It was as if the heavens were tearing themselves apart. Mason Hale, trudging a few paces behind him through knee-deep snow, let out a low whistle. "Tell me that's normal," Mason muttered, breath fogging in the frigid air. Jack shook his head. "Nope. And I've been here in worse winters. That," he pointed at the shifting lights, "isn't a weather phenomenon. They'd come out here for solitude." 3 days in the backcountry with rifles, gear, and no cell service was supposed to be a break from people. Jack, a former recon Marine turned survival instructor, wasn't easy to rattle. But something about the sky set his teeth on edge. The crunch of boots on snow and the wind's low moan were the only sounds until Mason tried to lighten the mood. "So what's the bet? Government experiment? Space jellyfish? Santa finally upgrading his sleigh?" Jack didn't answer. His gaze lingered on the treeline ahead, scanning for movement. Mason had been his best friend since high school, reliable in a fight, reckless in conversation. But right now Jack's instincts were screaming at him to shut up and listen. Far above, unseen by human eyes, a ship the size of a skyscraper hung in low orbit, cloaked in a shimmer of bending light. Inside, the Vshar watched their monitors with clinical interest. They were a warrior race whose expansion had been checked only by the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, and they believed they had found a new one to catalog. The trial was simple: release a specimen of their most formidable engineered predator, the Krythak, onto a test world. Observe, record, and measure the panic. Earth had been selected for its variety of fauna, though initial scans had placed humans somewhere in the middle of the food chain, potentially dangerous in numbers but individually fragile. This test would confirm it. Jack and Mason knew nothing of the eyes above them. They only knew the woods felt wrong. The silence was too complete, the air too heavy. An hour later they found the elk. Or what was left of it. The carcass was torn apart, ribs cracked open like kindling, snow stained in wide arcs of dark red. Jack crouched beside it, touching the snow near the body. It was still warm. Steam rose faintly in the cold air. "This wasn't a bear," he said quietly. "No kidding." Mason's voice was tight. "Claw marks are too deep. And," he gestured to the shredded hindquarters, "something tried to eat the bones." Jack rose, scanning the treeline. Whatever did this is still close. Above them, in the alien vessel, the Vshar commanders leaned closer to their displays. Through their predator's visual feed they could see the two humans. One examined the scene with a soldier's discipline, the other with the alert tension of someone realizing they were prey. The elder observers murmured in their guttural tongue, predicting the human pair would be easy kills. The Krythak moved through the forest with lethal precision. Nearly 10 feet from nose to tail, all sinew and armor like hide, it was a blend of predator DNA from worlds the Vshar had conquered. Its forelimbs ended in curved talons designed to pierce bone. And it was hungry. The first sound Jack heard was not a roar but a soft crunch, snow compressing under great weight. He signaled Mason to freeze. The sound came again, closer, from their left. They turned slowly. Between the black pines, a shadow shifted, too large, too deliberate to be any animal Mason had ever seen. For a heartbeat, Jack caught a glint, a pair of eyes, low and forward, reflecting a light that wasn't there. The thing didn't charge. Just watched. Mason's hand twitched toward his rifle, but Jack raised a hand. "Not yet," he whispered. "It's testing us." In the orbiting vessel, a young Vshar tactician smirked. The humans hadn't even run. They were frozen like every other prey species caught in the Krythak's gaze. But the Krythak didn't attack. It melted back into the darkness, silent as mist. Jack exhaled slowly. "That wasn't curiosity," he murmured. "That was strategy." They moved, keeping their rifles up, circling back toward their camp. Mason muttered under his breath. "I don't like being on the menu." The aurora overhead pulsed brighter, casting long, shifting shadows across the snow. The wind picked up, carrying with it a scent so musky and sharp it made Mason gag. Jack's expression hardened. They reached their camp by nightfall, a clearing near the frozen river, their tent and supplies dusted in fine snow. Mason busied himself checking the fire while Jack crouched low, scanning the ground for tracks. There were new ones. Not animal. Not human. A rumble split the air. It was low at first, almost a vibration through the ground before swelling into something primal and wrong. Mason's head snapped up. What the hell was that? Jack didn't answer. He'd heard roars before, lions in Africa, grizzlies in Alaska. This wasn't one of them. This was cleaner. Purposeful. Like the sound a predator made not to scare prey, but to announce the hunt had begun. High above, the VSHAR commander gave the order to continue observation. They wanted to see the fear bloom before the end. On the ground, Jack felt the hairs on his neck rise. The sound came again, this time from the opposite side of the clearing. We're being circled, he said flatly. The cold bit harder. The shadows deepened. Mason gripped his rifle tighter, and Jack adjusted his stance, every sense honed and ready. Somewhere beyond the treeline, something patient and intelligent was closing in. And far above, unseen by the men on the snow, the galaxy watched in anticipation. Snow whispered under Jack's boots as he moved through the dark, the rifle steady against his shoulder. Mason was a few paces behind, breathing hard, his eyes darting between the trees. The forest was alive with silence, the kind that swallows every natural sound. Not even the wind moved through the branches now. Something had claimed the night, and every creature knew better than to challenge it. From above, the alien vessel tracked them with unblinking precision. On one screen, the humans moved through an ocean of black and white shadows. On another, the Krythak's heat signature glowed like a molten ember weaving through the snowbound forest. The predator was in no rush. It had already closed the distance. Jack's mind was working the way it used to in combat zones, mapping terrain, marking choke points, imagining every angle of attack. He knew they couldn't keep moving in a straight line. Predators loved patterns. Zig through the terrain, he whispered without looking back. Mason adjusted his path immediately. Years of hunting together had taught him when Jack's voice carried that edge. Something shifted to their left, fast. Jack swung his rifle, but the movement vanished into the pines. The trees here were old, their trunks thick and close together, snow hanging in sagging clumps. The cover was perfect for something large that knew how to stalk. The first real attack came without warning. A shape blurred out of the dark, low and fast, faster than any bear or wolf could move. Mason barely had time to yell before Jack slammed into him, shoving them both into the snow as claws slashed the air where Mason's torso had been. The predator's momentum carried it past them, a whisper of muscle and hide before it melted into the treeline again. Mason rolled onto one knee, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Jack didn't answer immediately. His breathing was controlled, eyes scanning, ears straining for the faintest noise. Big. Fast. Smarter than it should be. In orbit, the VSHAR's younger officers exchanged quiet bets on how long the humans would last. The older one said nothing, studying Jack's face on the magnified feed. His expression wasn't fear, it was calculation. They pressed on, moving deeper into the forest. Jack kept them angled toward the canyon he'd scouted earlier in the day. Its steep rock walls and narrow approach would limit the predator's mobility. He didn't say this aloud. Mason was already on edge and information was a weapon Jack used carefully. A faint crunch echoed behind them. They both froze. Slowly, Jack reached into his jacket, pulling out a small canister from his survival kit. He twisted the cap, releasing a pungent, acrid cloud that stung the nose. Mason coughed. What is that? Wind's carrying our scent away. Won't stop it, but it might make it work harder. The alien commander watched with mild amusement. Primitive measures, nothing that could deter a Krythak. But still, the humans were deviating from prey patterns. They weren't running in panic, they were shaping the fight. The forest thinned briefly, opening into a snow-covered glade. Jack didn't like it, too exposed, too many angles. Halfway across, the night erupted. A black shape exploded from the shadows, talons extended, mouth splitting into a snarl lined with needle teeth. Jack pivoted, fired once. The round struck the beast's shoulder, it roared but didn't slow. Mason's second shot caught it along the flank, driving it sideways into the snow. For a moment, Jack saw it clearly. The thing was massive, its hide a patchwork of scaled plates and scar tissue. Its forelimbs were absurdly long, built for grappling, while its hind legs were coiled with explosive muscle. The eyes were the worst, deep, calculating, aware. It recovered in less than a breath, vanishing into the trees. Blood spattered the snow where it had fallen, steaming in the cold. Mason swore. We hit it, but that thing's not stopping. Jack's voice was calm. Good. Means it can bleed. From above, the Vshar murmured among themselves. A wounded Krythak was rare. That the humans had drawn blood this early was unexpected. The path to the canyon grew steeper. Rocks jutted from the snow, slick and treacherous, but Jack pushed the pace. The predator wasn't trying to kill them outright, it was driving them. That meant it had a preferred kill zone, and Jack had no intention of obliging. An hour later, the forest thickened again, swallowing the moonlight. Mason stumbled on a root, cursing under his breath. Jack slowed just enough to glance back, and caught movement above. A shadow detached itself from the branches, descending in eerie silence. Down? Jack barked. Mason dropped as the predator landed where he'd been, snow exploding outward. Jack swung his rifle up, but a taloned arm batted it aside, sending it skidding into the dark. Mason scrambled to his feet, slashing with his hunting knife. The blade barely grazed the hide before the Krythak's other arm lashed out, claws raking across Mason's forearm. Blood sprayed onto the snow. Jack tackled the creature low, driving his shoulder into its midsection. It was like hitting a wall of iron, but the force staggered it just enough for Mason to break free. The predator snarled, the sound vibrating in Jack's bones, before leaping back into the shadows. Mason gritted his teeth, pressing a gloved hand to his arm. Not fatal, he said almost apologetically. Jack retrieved his rifle, eyes scanning the darkness. It's testing our reactions. Next time it won't pull back. In the alien ship, one of the tacticians shifted uncomfortably. This was not the sequence they had predicted. The humans should be exhausted, their fear overriding coordination. Instead, they were adapting, changing formation, adjusting to the predator's rhythm. The snow began to fall harder, muting the world into shades of gray. Jack led them in a jagged path, pausing at every rise to check their back trail. The Krythak followed, but no longer in silence. Every so often they'd hear it, just a footfall, just a branch breaking. It was letting them know it was still there. Mason's voice was low. Feels like it's trying to get in our heads. It is, Jack replied. The trick is not letting it. They reached the edge of the canyon. A narrow ledge hugged the cliffside, dropping away into darkness. Jack signaled Mason to take point while he watched their rear. The predator didn't follow immediately, which made Jack uneasy. Halfway along the ledge, Mason froze. Jack followed his gaze. Ahead, where the path widened slightly, snow shifted, like something breathing under it. Slowly, the Krythak rose from its crouch, having waited in perfect stillness for them to come to it. Mason raised his rifle. The beast moved first. It surged forward, claws lashing, forcing Mason back toward the drop. Jack slammed into it from the side, his shoulder crunching against its plated hide. The impact spun them both dangerously close to the edge. For a split second, they were locked there, predator and man, breath steaming in the freezing air, each searching for the other's weakness. The Krythak's eyes burned with an alien intelligence, and Jack understood in that moment. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a duel. The alien commander leaned forward in his seat, every secondary heart pounding. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Snow shifted under Jack's boots. The ledge groaned. Mason shouted something, but the sound was drowned in the beast's roar. The world narrowed to muscle, ice, and survival. And then the ledge gave way. The last thing Mason saw before the whiteout swallowed them both was Jack's hand clamped around the predator's forelimb, dragging it with him into the abyss. The fall wasn't clean. Jagged rock tore at Jack's parka as the world became a blur of white and black. The Krythak's weight pulled them faster, its claws scoring deep gouges into the cliff face in a frantic attempt to slow the descent. Jack twisted midair, shoving a boot against the rock to pivot them, using its own momentum to keep its talons away from his throat. They hit hard. Snow cushioned some of the impact, but the frozen earth beneath it drove the breath from his lungs. Pain screamed up his ribs, and for a moment he couldn't move. The predator recovered faster, rising in a slow, deliberate motion that said it hadn't expected him to survive. Jack staggered to his feet, rifle lost somewhere in the fall. His hand closed around a chunk of broken rock, sharp along one edge. The Krythak circled, its breath clouding in the frigid air, each step crunching through the snow like a slow drumbeat. Up in orbit, the alien observers leaned forward. This was the point in every trial where the prey's resolve shattered. Instead, the human squared his stance, weight on the balls of his feet, eyes locked on the beast as though measuring it for disassembly. The first lunge came without warning. Jack sidestepped, swinging the rock into the creature's flank. The blow scraped harmlessly against its armored hide, but the motion gave him enough space to back toward a cluster of boulders. Narrow gaps between them offered cover, maybe even a trap. The Krythak followed, head low, testing his reactions. Its injured shoulder from earlier hung a fraction lower. Jack filed the weakness away. His ribs ached with every breath, but pain was an old companion, useful, grounding. Snow sifted down from above, catching in the collar of his jacket. He could hear Mason somewhere on the cliff shouting his name, but the words were faint and useless. This was his fight now. Jack slipped between the boulders, forcing the predator to follow. Here the space was tighter. Its long limbs couldn't fully extend. It tried to rear back, to strike downward, but each movement was slowed. Jack's heart pounded, not with fear but with the rhythm of problem-solving. He needed more than rocks. He scanned the ground, spotting the splintered remains of a fallen tree half buried in the snow. He yanked a length free, the wood brittle but serviceable, then braced one end against a stone and began sharpening the other against a jagged rock. Every scrape of wood on stone echoed in the cold air, a primitive, steady rhythm. In the alien ship, one of the younger tacticians frowned. The human was preparing? No prey prepared under pursuit. They ran until their lungs failed or they hid until they were found. This one was building something. The Krythak prowled at the boulder's edge, eyes never leaving him. When it lunged again, Jack sidestepped into the gap and drove the sharpened wood toward its wounded shoulder. The point bit deeper this time, sliding between armored plates. The predator roared, jerking back violently, the spear snapping in Jack's grip but leaving a shard embedded. It wasn't enough to kill, but it was enough to change the balance. Now it knew he could hurt it. Jack retreated deeper into the canyon floor, weaving between stones, forcing the beast to twist and contort to follow. Every time it tried to close the gap, he struck at the injured side, each blow chipping away at its confidence. The Vshar commander narrowed his eyes. This was no accident. The human was conditioning the predator, teaching it to expect pain when it approached. Few species dared to alter the predator's behavior mid-hunt. Fewer succeeded. Mason's voice echoed faintly again, closer now, but Jack didn't answer. Distraction could get them both killed. He pressed on, deeper into the canyon until the walls narrowed into a choke point no wider than a small car. Here, snow had drifted high against one side, creating a slope of unstable powder. Jack studied it quickly. The snowpack was held in place by a crust of ice. Break that and the slide would come down fast. He glanced at the Krythak. It was pacing just beyond the choke point, wary now, head tilting slightly as if assessing the trap. "You learn fast," Jack murmured. "So do I." He moved into the choke point, letting it see him. He stood exposed, weaponless but steady. The Krythak lowered itself, muscles bunching. From above, Mason's voice broke through, sharp with alarm. "Jack, behind you." The predator lunged, faster this time, all hesitation gone. Jack turned at the last instant, leaping sideways into the snowbank. His boots hit the ice crust, and the brittle surface fractured with a sound like breaking glass. The snow roared down in a heavy, blinding wave, engulfing predator and man alike. Jack had been ready. He dove toward the canyon wall, pressing himself into a narrow pocket between rocks as the avalanche thundered past. The Krythak was caught full force, slammed against the wall and buried in a churn of white. Silence followed, broken only by the faint hiss of settling snow. Jack crawled free, lungs burning, every muscle trembling from cold and exertion. He scanned the burial site. The predator's heat signature would still be high, but its mobility was crippled for the moment. From orbit, the alien commander hissed a quiet order to pause the feed for tactical review. This was no ordinary engagement. The human had not only survived multiple attacks but had actively shaped the battlefield against a superior predator. Jack didn't linger. He began moving back toward the cliff wall, searching for a climbable path. Mason's voice came again, closer this time. Relief pricked at him, short-lived because the snow behind him shifted. A taloned hand burst from the drift, claws gleaming. The Krythak hauled itself free, slower but no less dangerous, snow clinging to its hide. Its breath steamed in the cold, each exhale sharp with rage. Jack's eyes narrowed. Round 2 then. The predator stepped forward, but this time it hesitated just outside his reach, head tilting as if reassessing him entirely. Something in its gaze had changed, not just recognition but respect. They faced each other in the narrowing dusk, breath visible, muscles coiled. Somewhere high above, the aliens watching realized this hunt was no longer proceeding on their terms. Jack didn't advance. He waited, forcing the creature to make the next move. Snow fell between them, the flakes drifting lazily despite the tension that hummed like a live wire. Mason's voice reached him again, urgent now, but Jack didn't take his eyes off the predator. The Krythak's tail lashed once, a slow, deliberate motion, and then it stepped back into the shadows, vanishing into the canyon's labyrinth. Jack exhaled, finally allowing himself to turn toward the cliff wall where Mason was scrambling down. His friend's face was pale, his injured arm wrapped in a crude bandage. "You alive?" Mason asked, breathless. "For now," Jack said, glancing back into the dark where the predator had gone. "But it's not finished. And neither am I." Far above, in the alien command chamber, silence held for several long seconds before the commander spoke in a low, grim tone. "The human is no longer prey. He is the hunter." The night had deepened into something heavier than darkness. Clouds smothered the stars, and the wind pressed low through the canyon like a warning. Jack crouched by the meager fire Mason had managed to coax from damp kindling, its glow painting the rock walls in restless orange. The heat barely touched them, but that wasn't why the flames burned. It was bait. Mason sat with his back to the stone, his injured arm cradled against his chest. The gash was clotted but ugly, wrapped in strips torn from Jack's spare shirt. He watched the fire without looking at Jack, his voice low enough to keep from echoing. "You're planning on letting it come to us." Jack's eyes never left the darkness beyond the flickering light. "It's been studying us since the first contact. It knows how we move, how we shoot. Now it needs to think we're exhausted. Vulnerable." Mason snorted softly, though the sound was tight. "That part's not hard to sell." In orbit, the Vshar observers saw through the Krythak's feed as it crept along the canyon's upper ledge, silent and patient. The commander could sense the predator's focus sharpen, its movements tightening into the rhythm of the kill. To the alien mind, the outcome was inevitable. The human might have prolonged the chase, but no one defeated a Krythak unarmed. The fire popped sharply. Mason flinched, but Jack didn't move. His breathing was slow, even, his gaze fixed just past the reach of the light. He'd fought enemies who could think, who could adapt, but never one that combined that intelligence with the raw power of a killing machine. This was the final measure, not just of his skill, but of his ability to impose will over something designed to be unstoppable. A faint scrape echoed above, the whisper of stone dislodged under a heavy step. Jack's eyes narrowed. He leaned toward Mason without shifting his shoulders. "When it drops in, go for the flare. Don't aim at it, blind it." Mason nodded once, his good hand already reaching toward his belt. The scrape came again, closer, then silence. The canyon swallowed the sound until the air felt brittle with expectation. Jack could almost hear his heartbeat in the stillness. It struck without warning, a shadow tearing through the firelight in a blur of muscle and claws. Mason snapped the flare to life, a burst of searing red that filled the canyon with furious light. The Krythak recoiled, eyes narrowing against the glare, but its momentum carried it forward into the kill zone. Jack was already moving. He caught its forelimb as it slashed down, twisting his body with the blow instead of resisting it. The movement pulled the predator off balance, its weight shifting forward. Jack stepped inside the arc of its other claw, driving his shoulder under its chest and forcing its head up. The impact rattled through him like colliding with a vehicle, but he didn't let go. The Krythak roared, twisting violently, trying to shake him loose. Its tail lashed the air, clipping Mason and sending him sprawling against the canyon wall. Jack planted his feet, using every ounce of leverage his frame could muster. This wasn't about matching strength, it was about taking its weapons away. He dropped low, wrenching the forelimb sideways until something deep in its shoulder joint popped with a wet crack. The predator's snarl turned sharp with pain. Jack didn't pause. He shifted his grip to the base of its neck, his forearm crushing against its windpipe. The Krythak thrashed, claws tearing furrows into the stone walls, but each movement costed air. In the alien vessel, silence fell over the command deck. They watched as the human, weaponless, battered, began to choke the life from a creature bred to dominate any battlefield. To them it was impossible. To Jack it was necessary. The predator tried to buck him off, slamming its back into the canyon wall, but Jack rolled with each impact, keeping his arm tight across its throat. His free hand reached for something, anything, and closed on one of the broken talons from its injured forelimb. The serrated edge was slick with its own blood. He drove it upward into the vulnerable seam beneath its jaw. The Krythak's roar became a guttural choke. Blood, hot and metallic, gushed over his hand. Its legs kicked against the rock, power bleeding away with every second. Jack gritted his teeth, feeling the tremor in its frame, the way its muscles stopped resisting and started sagging. He held on until the weight of it dragged them both to their knees, until the breath stopped moving in its chest. The moment stretched long after the fight was over. Jack's own breathing was ragged now, his arms shaking from the strain. He let go and the beast slumped sideways, a mountain of flesh and hide settling into the snow with a final shuddering exhale. Mason pulled himself upright, staring at the carcass with wide eyes. You just killed that thing. With your hands." Jack wiped the blood from his face with the back of his sleeve, his expression unreadable. "No. I killed it with patience." Far above, the Vshar commander finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. "End the trial. Pull the teams back." One of his officers hesitated. "Commander, this was not a victory for the Krythak." The commander's gaze lingered on the human in the feed, the way he moved to help his wounded companion before even glancing at the dead predator. "No," he said quietly. "It was a warning." Jack and Mason began the slow climb out of the canyon, the dawn just beginning to break over the ridge. The sky was pale and sharp, the kind of cold light that made the snow seem endless. Mason's steps were uneven, but he kept moving, leaning against Jack when the pain was too much. Neither of them spoke about what had happened. There was no need. They both knew the fight hadn't been about skill alone, it had been about refusing to give the predator what it wanted. On the alien ship, data was archived, files sealed under high security. Officially, the trial would be marked as inconclusive. Unofficially, orders were sent across the Vshar fleets. Avoid solitary human engagement. Avoid prolonged ground contact. And if forced into confrontation, strike from distance, never up close. At the canyon's edge, Jack paused to look back. The fire was dead, the snow already starting to reclaim the space where the fight had ended. The Krythak's body was just a dark shape half buried, its presence fading into the white. Mason followed his gaze, then shook his head. "Next time, we're going somewhere with beaches." Jack allowed the smallest smile. "Beaches have sharks." "Yeah," Mason said, wincing as they started walking again. "But at least those don't climb trees." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and cold stone. Jack kept his eyes on the treeline ahead, senses still tuned for the smallest movement. The hunt was over, but he knew something they didn't. Predators weren't the only ones who learned from a fight. And far above, in the endless dark between the stars, the galaxy now carried a new understanding. Humanity was not just a species to be measured. It was a species to be feared. He let himself breathe. The predator's corpse lay half buried in frost, steam rising from its ruined body. The forest was silent, not the tense kind of silence they had endured for hours, but the hollow, relieved quiet that followed a storm. Mason leaned heavily against a boulder, a crude bandage tied around his side, the flare's dying glow painting his face in ember-red light. "You're insane," Mason said, voice hoarse, though there was something dangerously close to admiration in his tone. No one takes one of those things barehanded." Jack gave a faint shrug, eyes still on the beast. "Guess no one tried hard enough." Above them, the clouds began to break. A thin blade of sunlight cut through the gray, washing the canyon in pale gold. Mason followed Jack's gaze upward. "They were watching," he said quietly. Jack didn't have to ask who. He'd felt the prickle on the back of his neck long before the fight ended. Somewhere beyond the atmosphere, in ships cloaked and silent, alien eyes had witnessed every brutal second. And they would report back with voices shaking about the human who refused to die. "You think they'll come again?" Mason asked. Jack finally looked at him, the corner of his mouth twitching into something almost like a grin. "Maybe. But next time they'll remember this." A distant rumble echoed through the mountains. Not thunder, but the muted hum of engines far above. Watching. Leaving. And for the first time since the nightmare began, the air felt lighter. They made their way down the slope, Mason stumbling but refusing help, Jack keeping just close enough to catch him if he fell. Every step left a trail of deep footprints in the snow, a record of their passage that the wind would eventually erase. But some marks, Jack knew, wouldn't fade so easily. Not in their world. Not in theirs. By the time the last glimmer of sunlight slipped behind the peaks, they were gone from sight. The predator remained, a frozen monument to the day Earth's deadliest thing proved it wasn't the creature that stalked the woods, it was the man who walked them. And somewhere, in the cold dark between the stars, an entire galaxy whispered one word with equal parts awe and fear. Human. High above Earth's curve, in the silent cold of orbit, a command chamber glowed dim green. Rows of alien officers stood frozen in disbelief as the final combat footage replayed on the central hollow. It was slowed to half speed, every brutal detail preserved, The human's bare, bloodied hands gripping the predator's throat, the impossible strength, the moment the galaxy's deadliest apex fell. A low, guttural voice broke the silence. He fought, without weapons? Another answered, its tone trembling. He was the weapon. In the far shadows, a taller figure stepped forward, its armor dark and ridged like the predator's own hide. Its eyes burned with a cold, strategic fire. Then the archives are wrong, it said. Earth is not a protected nursery world. It is a forge. One of the officers hissed, "Shall we intervene?" The commander turned, gazing out the viewport where Earth hung like a blue gem in the dark. "No," it said at last. "Let them think they've won. But prepare the trials." The chamber lights dimmed further. Below, the planet spun silently, unaware that new predators were already charting their course, not toward Earth's beasts but toward the humans who killed them. And somewhere in the forests, a trail of frozen footprints lay beneath a thin layer of fresh snow, hiding the fact that the real hunt had only just begun.